Hey, it's Greg Stanley. Welcome to the Collector Car Podcast. I've got a lot of stuff to cover here on this episode. I'm covering some of the interesting results that I found out that occurred during Scottsdale for RM Sotheby's big sale they had there 2 weeks ago or so. So I wasn't there in person, unfortunately. I did have a couple cars in the sale that did sell, thankfully. Some really nice cars, and there were some great offerings, and it was a great result. Even so, I think there's a few things we can garner from how the collector car marketplace is going based on these results. So I've kind of broken this up into a lot of different kind of sub buckets. So if you would, entertain me and check this out. Listen to what I have to say. You may agree, you may not agree. One little bit of car news before that is I just had dinner with a good friend of mine, Chuck, and we talked cars, and he alerted me to the fact that Mazda is coming out with a hybrid rotary engine, some type of sport ute. So I want to do some more information. I want to look into this a little bit more and find out more about it, because it's cool that the rotary is coming back in some form at Mazda. So stay tuned for some more information about that. So the first car I want to do, now if you're watching me on YouTube, you'll see some of the pictures of these cars pop up on screen here. So if you're listening to audio only, you can always go to YouTube and check this out. I will give you some of the highlights per car. I am multitasking if you're watching the YouTube video, so I've got a lot going on behind the scenes here to bring you not only the audio aspect of it, but the video aspect as well as some pictures. So I categorize this first bucket as surprising results. So these are some results I just thought were interesting. They kind of bucked a trend when it comes to what's happening in the collector car marketplace nowadays. And mostly I relate this to cars from the 50s and the 60s. As you know, there's been a demographic change going on here where, you know what, if a 1957 Thunderbird was your dream car, chances are you're trying to unload it right now as you liquidate a large part of your collection, which has depressed prices on some of the cars from the 1950s and even from the 1960s. Now, there's always outliers, and there always will be what I call the pinnacle cars. So, you know, like a 57 Chevy or a 58 Cadillac Brougham. I think those will always buck the trend because they're the best of the best for any particular generation of cars. So the one I'm calling out here, and I have the picture on YouTube right now, is a 1959 Buick LeSabre Hardtop Custom Coupe. The estimate was $80,000 to $100,000. The Hammer sold all in for just under $130,000, so it exceeded the high estimate. Now, coming up with an estimate for a car at an auction is a fine science. The car specialists work very hard looking at recent sales to find out what's going on in the marketplace to do their best job to identify what this car would sell for. This was a really tough one because it's a custom built, kind of a hot rodded Buick. Very cool. Let's see, color built by Color on Wheels of Denver, Colorado. A lot of unique touches. And the thing about these types of cars, you know, just because they're unique touches for the person who builds it, doesn't mean you're going to find a buyer who also likes those unique touches. So it has a 540-inch cubic inch V8, automatic transmission, outlaw shifter. Really, really cool car. I was just surprised that this actually exceeded the high estimate. Typically, any type of resto mod / hot rod are tough sales where getting even a fraction of the build cost back is usually pretty tough. So this was a surprising result and definitely worth it. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. Looks like it's top quality build, but just a hard sale. So I was pleased to see that that one did so well. Now, I mentioned T-Birds a second ago, and this next car I'm bringing up is a T-Bird. It's a rarer T-Bird. This one's a 1962 Ford Thunderbird M-Code Sports Roadster. Now, the Roadsters were definitely rarer. The estimate on this one was $125,000 to $150,000, black with red interior. Now, this one was offered from a family collection, so probably a well-known collection. The quality of the cars within the collection were probably well-known, which gives this some nice provenance, gives you some secure feeling when you're bidding on this car. This one sold for $196,000, almost $200,000, all in for this Thunderbird M-Code. So one of 120 sports roadsters, M-Code Thunderbirds, produced for 1962. It was restored by a marquee specialist in the early 1990s, so it's not a fresh restoration, but it looks like it's in absolutely perfect condition. The M code is a 390 cubic inch V8, 3 two-barrel carburetors. So that's pretty rare. Won a lot of awards, AACA. Very, very cool. Now the Haggerty 1-year trend, just for reference, up 10.1%. That kind of goes with the rest of the entire collector car industry being up over the last few years. I do think we have peaked. I think the peak probably happened about 2 months ago, and you'll only see cars decline right themselves in the foreseeable future. We'll see if I'm right or wrong. Usually it takes 6 months of history, 8 months of history to see what the true trends were. But beautiful car, and that one sold very strongly, and that one definitely surprised me. All right, the next one is another car from the 1950s, a 1956 Chrysler 300B. This is of the letter series. I've always loved the Chryslers. I drive a Chrysler 300C right now. That's my daily, 2014. I would love to have one of these earlier Chryslers. Now this one, the estimate was $90,000 to $120,000, and this one hammered sold all in for $145,600. A lot of money. Now this was restored to a high standard in 2012 by Mopar experts. This one has the desirable high compression 354 cubic inch firepower V8 engine with dual 4-barrel carburetors producing 355 horsepower. Attractive color combination, red with tan interior. Just stunning and beautiful. I wouldn't call it the most attractive letter car from the 50s. I would say a 57 300C would be more attractive, but it's just stunning. Well documented. Now here's an interesting point. The 1-year trend is actually slightly down, minus 0.8%, basically flat. But this car, again, sold extremely well considering the trends recently in the marketplace. And this one was definitely in my surprising bucket. Now the next one, and I call this clawing their way to the low estimate. So when you're making your estimates for these cars, you try to capture most recent trends, like I said before. The market has been so hot lately that sometimes you cannot, catch up with what the car's value had increased to. So, for example, if a car typically sells for $100,000, you think it's doing really well. Recent auction results have been very strong. So you put a low estimate of $120,000 on it, a high estimate of $140,000, and it hammers for $150,000. It just might be you're not keeping up with the demand on these cars. So I think this is another sign that the marketplace has slowed recently, in that a lot of these cars basically clawed their way to the low estimate. I think the estimates were good. They were strong. I just think that the market is slowing. So the first one is the 1987 Mercedes-Benz 560 SL. I've said this many times before. If the car, for a long time, if the car had 100,000 miles on it, it was worth $10,000. If it had 10,000 miles on it, it was worth $100,000. Now that scale has increased over the last 2 years or so. So that $100,000 car, now that 100,000 mile car, is now probably worth closer to $17,000 or $18,000, and the 10,000 mile car is worth closer to probably $130,000, $140,000. So it's just kind of scaled up. The estimate on this car was $50,000 to $60,000. It hammered sold for just under $50,000, just a hair over $47,000. Now this was a wonderful 2-owner low mileage example. I don't know the mileage offhand. It's white with dark blue interior, dark blue soft top. Royal blue leather interior, 5.6 liter V8 engine. Very, very iconic, cool car that's been gaining value in the marketplace for a number of years now. And it hit slightly low estimate. The 1-year trend is up 12.4%. I think if you would have looked 6 months ago, that would have been up probably 30-40%. So again, an example of the market slowing. All right, the next one was the big car for the Scottsdale auction, the 2014 Ferrari LaFerrari. Now the estimate on this car, I actually think this is one of the prettiest Ferraris made in a long time. Estimate was $4 million to $4.5 million. Hammered sold with the buyer's fees, just a hair over $4 million. Again, just got barely over the low estimate, including the buyer's fee. The 1-year trend's up 13.3%. This one had just under 3,200 miles. So another example of probably the market slowing. Just a beautiful color. It's like a blue electrico over crema leather. Wonderful color combination on this car. All right, the next bucket I wanted to talk about is the NASCAR. So there were a couple NASCAR race cars in this auction. And my heading for this is the NASCARs are just not there yet. So the estimates are probably a little harder to come up on these NASCARs. I know that there's a lot that goes into the provenance of these cars. Who drove the cars? What were the racing results? What was the race? A lot of stuff went into these. So the first one's a 2007 Chevrolet Impala SS NASCAR Jimmie Johnson car. The estimate was $150,000 to $200,000. Hammer sold at $134,400. This is a key component of Jimmie Johnson's unbeaten 5-season NASCAR Cup championship streak, driven by Johnson at Martinsville and Phoenix during the 2007 season. I think these are just not appreciated yet. I know there's some racing series where you can actually drive these cars. They are definitely iconic. They're definitely amazing, incredible cars. They're not as hard to work on as a lot of the other race cars that have been selling for incredible amounts recently. I'm referencing mostly the Formula One cars. So the estimate being $150,000 to $200,000, maybe a little optimistic, but it's probably where it needs to be. And yet it still did not meet the low estimate. All right, the next one is one of Jimmie Johnson's competitors. It's a 2013 Chevrolet SS NASCAR Jeff Gordon edition. So the estimate on this one was $100,000 to $150,000, and it hammered sold just under $90,000. I do think that if you want to have a true NASCAR, go after the big names, the Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s, the Jimmie Johnsons, the Jeff Gordons. Get one of their championship cars right now. I don't think they'll go down in the future. I think it's a great time to buy these. They're just not appreciated. Now, this one was his primary road course car for the 2013 NASCAR Cup season, driven at Sonoma Raceway, finishing second, and Watkins Glen. If I were to have one of these, I'd want to go for one of the championship cars, maybe one that finished first or was in the championship race at the end of the year. Yeah, just really, really cool cars. I just feel like, you know what, the market hasn't awakened to these yet, but it will get there. Now, another thing that kind of pointed to me that these trends are slowing are the Porsches. Now, there's a couple Porsches here. First one I'll talk to is an iconic 1997 Porsche 911 Turbo S. Let's see, estimate was $550,000 to $650,000. And a hammer sold for just under $550,000. Now, keep in mind that the hammered price included the 10 or 12% buyer's fee, so the actual hammer price was less than $550,000. This is one of 183 examples produced for North America in 1997. This is one of my favorite Porsches. You've got the extra scoop at the rear haunches for the rear brake ducts. It's got the whale tail. I remember when these came out new. I absolutely loved them. Let's see, this one was showing only 22,000 miles on it at the time of cataloging. The one-year trend's up 15.4%, and yet this one barely reached the low, actually did not reach the low estimate, but got pretty close. All right, the next one is pretty iconic. It's a 2009 Ferrari 430 Scuderia. Estimate on this car was $500,000 to $750,000, so that is a big, wide range for that car. Hammered sold all in just under $430,000. Let's see, this one's basically a brand new car, just 644 miles on the odometer at the time of cataloging. It's black over black. Those aren't the official Ferrari paint descriptions. Powered by the 4.3 liter V8 engine, F1 superfast automated manual transmission. The one-year trend on these is very strong, up 37.4%. And yet this one did not quite make the low estimate. Very interesting. Very, very cool car. All right, the next one's another Porsche, a very significant Porsche here. 2011 Porsche 911 GT3 RS. Now this one, maybe the colors put a little bit into it. It's blue with dark charcoal interior, but it's got the red graphics, including the red wheels. In my mind, not the most attractive color combination on one of these cars, but it is a GT3 RS. Let's see, $400,000 to $600,000 was the estimate. They hammered sold for just over $400,000, $406,500. Ultra rare, low mileage, 997.2 generation GT3 RS, the last offered with a manual transmission and benefiting from mid-cycle updates, including higher output flat 6. If I were to have another Porsche right now, it would be one of the 997.2s. Wouldn't have to be the GT3. It could be a base Carrera. I would love to have one of those. All right, believed to be one of only 100 produced for 2011 and one of 571 total with the more potent 3.8 liter engine. Now again, this is a brand new car showing only 374 miles on the odometer. All right, let's see. Cool car for sure. All right, the next one is another Porsche. A lot of Porsches here that seem to be softening a bit. This one's a 1993 Porsche Turbo S lightweight. So this is definitely an iconic Porsche Turbo. Estimates $1 to $1.3 million. A hammered sold just under low estimate at $962,000. One of just 86 Turbo S lightweight examples engineered by Porsche to weigh over 400 pounds less than the standard Turbo S. This particular car was delivered new to Japan, imported to the US in 2015. Let's see, numbers matching engine. Let's see, speed yellow over black and gray upholstery with a black headliner. Definitely an iconic, amazing car from the factory. Again, sold just under low estimate. Sold correctly, but just under the low estimate. All right, the next one is one of the iconic Porsches, the 2005 Porsche Carrera GT. These have been very interesting for a long time because these are kind of considered one of the blue chip cars you want to follow when you want to see how healthy is the collector car marketplace. The estimate was $1.2 to $1.4 million. That seems dead on. This is kind of that steel gray over terracotta leather. I love the terracotta interior. It's just really, really beautiful. So it hammered just over low estimate at $1.242 million. This one had less than 13,000 miles at the time of cataloging. The one-year trend is up 26.7%. This one barely made it to the low estimate, so these might be slowing down a little bit. But absolutely beautiful, stunning car. All right, talking about absolutely beautiful, stunning car. Not all of you will agree with me on this one, but the next one is the 1992 Ferrari F40. Again, this is another one of the blue chip collectibles. You can kind of watch and see how the market's trending. Estimate is $2.2 million to $2.8 million. Sold just under 2.2 at 2.15. This is iconic. It's got the red with the factory red cloth seats. I just saw 5 of these, helped judge 5 of these down at Cavallino 2 weekends ago. All of them were unbelievable. This one has less than 13,000 miles, which is actually pretty high mileage for one of these cars. Let's see, has a couple previous owners. 1-year trend on these. These have been going through the roof over the last few years, up 26.9%. 2 years ago, you could have bought one of these for $1 million. Nowadays, this one at 2.15 is probably considered a bargain. But again, slightly higher mileage, and a big part of this includes what servicing has been done on these cars recently, because there's a lot of expense with the servicing aspect for these cars. All right, now some of these, this next bucket I call some blue chips have performed. So these are some of those blue chip cars I think did tremendously well at auction and continue to grow. The first one is a 1971 Ferrari 365 GT-B4, also known as the Daytona. This is one that I picked for my bull market list. I believe that these are going to go up in price, mostly because Dinos are now $700,000 to $800,000 cars. If you're looking at a #1 Concours Condition 1, it's just crazy to me that those would trade for a higher dollar amount than the V12 front engine Daytonas. So I think they will catch up. And this one kind of proves that point. The estimate was $550,000 to $600,000. Hammered sold for $665,000. Let's see, this is Rosso Chiaro over Nero, so red over black. 2 private owners, including 46 years of custody by the first caretaker. It has the Daytona seats in it. Factory equipped with air conditioning and power windows. less than 30,000 miles on it. Iconic car. 1 year trend is up 16.3%, and this one overperformed, went above the high estimate pretty significantly. All right, the next one is one that was the subject of one of my previous podcasts here. It's the 1969 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray ZL1 convertible. So if you listen to my podcast, you know that I had the original owner on of this iconic car, incredible car, one of two factory 1969 ZL1 Corvettes ever built. The estimate was $2.6 to $3 million on this car. Hammer sold for over $3.1 million. And this was really cool because Kevin McKay, Corvette historian, Corvette expert, previous podcast guest, he actually restored this car. We had the original owner on. A lot of incredible documentation. Won a lot of the big shows, Bloomington Gold certified. A lot of cool stuff about this car, how historic this car is, and it overachieved expectations. All right, we've got just a few more here. The next one, ironically, is another Porsche. So this is a 2011 Porsche 911 Speedster. So Porsche's had, I think it's 6 generations of Speedsters now. The first one was the 356 Speedster from the 50s. All the ones after that have been 911 Speedsters. They've mostly been kind of heritage editions, you know, to pay tribute to the original 356 Speedster. So this is the 2011. These are quite collectible because of the fact that they are Speedsters. They're not all that attractive. Some of them are more attractive than others. But if you're a serious Porsche collector, you want to have one from every generation. And this is the 997 generation. The estimate was $300,000 to $350,000. Hammer sold for $368,000, so it exceeded high estimate. They only made 356 examples, which is obviously based on the first Speedster, the 356. This one is pure blue over black leather. Now the 1 year trend on these is flat, 0.0%. This one has less than 4,000 miles on it, so it's probably filling out one of those big-time collections. Or hopefully it's a new collector that just bought their very first Porsche, and they're going to enjoy it. All right, the next one is one of those iconic analog supercars. It's a 1994 Lamborghini Diablo VT. This one really overperformed. If you talk to Countach owners, you talk to Diablo owners, they'll tell you the Diablo is a much better driving car in almost every respect, and it's a gorgeous car. I love the Countach, and I absolutely adore the Diablo as well. The estimate on this one was $250,000 to $300,000. Hammer sold for $379,000. Now this is a U.S. market example from the first year production. It's red with tan interior, champagne leather interior, pardon me. It's optioned with the carbon fiber rear wing, has a 5.7 liter V12 and 5-speed manual transmission, less than 10,000 miles from new. Now the 1 year trend on these is way up 53.1%, a tremendous amount, and you can see why. This could be one of those situations where the estimates are just not keeping up with the actual demand for these cars. All right, the next one we have is what I would call a next-gen car. It's a 2013 Bentley Continental Supersport ISR convertible. I think these Bentley Continentals are one of the most attractive cars that have been built in the last 15 years or so. Estimate on this one was $120,000 to $140,000, sold for over $200,000. This was built to commemorate the flying kilometer ice speed record, so it is a special edition, one of 100 built, just showing 60 miles since new. So it's a brand new car, Arctic white with ISR Mulliner design package. You know what? It has red graphics to it, black interior with red piping. So very attractive color combination. Pretty cool car. And it overachieved high estimate. All right, just a few more here, 3 more here. The next one's another Porsche, surprisingly. The 1956 Porsche 356, a 1600 Super Speedster. Now, this is the iconic Porsche Speedster that was really kind of made as the Econobox for the U.S. Changes were made, stuff was deleted, so it would be a faster, fun ride, and yet it's actually worth more today than it was when it was new, as compared to the other models. All right, so estimate was $275 to $325. It sold for $335, so just a little bit over high estimate. Among the most famous and treasured sports car designs of all time, this one was desirably equipped from new with the potent super engine and delivered to Munich. It's black with red interior, very attractive color combination. The 1 year trend is up 5.7%, and this one looks like one of the really nice ones to have. So it sold for pretty strong money. All right, 2 more to go. This is definitely a blue chip collectible, the 1958 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Roadster. Now, forever, these were trading for around $1 million, maybe a little bit under. They typically lagged behind the gull wings, but they're also known as a more enjoyable driving experience when compared to the gull wings. Not as cramped, not as hot. This one is absolutely stunning. This one has medium blue metallic over dark red leather interior. It has the red wheels that are also that blue color. Just stunning. The estimate was 1.7 to 1.9. To me, that is a very strong estimate. Usually you would see these cars more around the 1.5 to 1.6 range, and yet this one sold for $1.82 million. Numbers matching engine, gearbox, and body, restored in 2011, so it's not a fresh restoration, but it still looks incredibly nice. 1 year ownership, 1 year market trend is up 5.9%, but this one sold very, very, very well. Absolutely stunning. All right, our last one is kind of a quirky car, as I would call it. It is a 1952 Allard K2 Special Roadster. Now, this is one that surprised me in that it sold significantly under the low estimate. I guess I should have had this in another bucket. Estimate was $175,000 to $215,000. Now, these are really interesting European designed with American power plant, kind of the pre-Cobra. Carroll Shelby was known for driving racing these, kind of gave him the idea for the formula for the Cobra. So they're pretty hairy to drive. My understanding is they're pretty tough to drive. That might be one of the reasons why these have kind of suffered recently in the marketplace. So it hammered sold for just under $118,000. Let's see. So a special significant Allard K2 specified from new with J2X options. The J2X is the one you really want to have, so this one had some of those options built into it. It was exhibited at the 1952 New York Auto Show, which that is really cool. I've always loved these because they're like older Cobras, you know, so they're just really cool. They have that European flair to them, the big V8 engine in front. This one has, let's see, Chrysler Hemi V8. It was fully restored under previous ownership and maintained for competition with many carefully considered upgrades. So this one is actually built for vintage racing, which might be another factor into it selling for under the low estimate, because it might not be able to go directly onto street. It looks like it can, but maybe not. So still a beautiful, cool car. All right, as always, thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If I will see you in Amelia Island, shoot me a note. I would love to meet you in person. Just shoot me a note at Greg at the Collector Car Podcast or G Stanley at RM Sotheby's, and let's go grab a coffee, a milkshake, or a beer. Thanks for listening. I will talk to all of you next week.